Okay, the Philippine Constitution still part of your Chapter 4, Social, Political, Economic, and Cultural Issues in Philippine History. So this is actually the second topic, and under this we will be studying the 4 types of constitution that the Philippines already had, and these 4 types include the latest that we have now, okay, that we are following now, and we'll find out later what this is, but hopefully you already know kung ano yung constitution na meron tayo at the present, yung sinusunod natin. And this latest constitution is actually facing a great possibility of total change or revisions perhaps. Sa tingin ko, on my personal point of view, I am for change or revisions so long that it's still for the good of the people, and that's for the purpose of lengthening the years of the incumbent president, lengthening the years na uupo siya, so papatagalin niya yung kanyang pananatili sa pwesto, because that's a downright purpose of gaining for yourself alone, pang makasarili lamang yung dahilan kung bakit gusto mong patagalin yung pamamalagi mo sa pwesto. What else? I could not think of any reason of any politician or any president of this land kapag binabago niya ang constitution sa kadahilanan or para mapahaba yung kanyang pananatili sa pwesto. But if he is changing the constitution or revising it para baguhin yung sa tingin niya ay may absurdities or hindi gaanong nasusunod dahil may nakikita pang mga butas or may mga na ilulusot pa ang mga lumalabag dito, so kailangan siyang i-strengthen o paigtingin. So kung yan ang purpose, I am for the revision or changes in our constitution. Okay, let's find out muna ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng constitution class. So the constitution is the basic law of the land which we are all following. It is sacred and must have to be defended by the people, because if we do not defend it, then we will be in chaos. Kasi kapag hindi ka sumusunod at hindi mo binibigyang halaga, you are not paying respect to our constitution, then maybe or perhaps it's okay na you steal or you kill kasi walang paparusa sa'yo. O hindi ka mapapatawan ng karampatang parusa. So it should be strong and it should be defended by the people who crafted it. So the nation, compared to a 3-story building, has the Constitution as its foundation, and as much as it has to be strong and should stand the test of time. Okay, it says here that a constitution is like a 3-story building, or the nation is like a 2-story building na ang kanyang pundasyon ay yung constitution. Ibig sabihin, ang isang bansa na walang constitution or walang sinusunod na mga batas ay hindi gaanong matibay. Kayang-kaya yang i-invade ng ibang bansa kasi wala naman silang itinakda na mga batas sa kanilang lupain, sa kanilang sovereignty. So, ang constitution ang nagpapalakas ng puwersa ng isang bansa actually. Okay, so the Philippines had 4 constitutions framed by its people. As I've said, we will be discussing 4 types of the constitution that the Philippines already had, and the last one is actually the latest. Yun pa rin yung ina-apply at sinusunod natin sa kasalukuyan. I'd like to give or emphasize itong punto na sinabi dito na the Constitution should stand the test of time. What do we mean by it? Kapag sinasabi natin na kailangan na ang Constitution ay tumatagal, should stand the test of time, kailangan na the provisions under it or in it should be true from the time that it was crafted until today, and even in the future, in the next years to come, dapat totoo pa rin yun. It should stand the test of time. For example, may batas tayo na nagbabawal sa mga tao na magnakaw. So, yung batas na yun, totoo siya noong panahon na craft yung Constitution, at dapat totoo pa rin siya until today and in the coming years or in the future. So it should stand the test of time. It should remain relevant and significant to the people applying and following it. Okay. The Constitution refers to that body of rules and principles in accordance with which the powers of sovereignty are... Where are we? I'm sorry. Are regularly exercised. Ayan, regularly. Hindi pwedeng sinusunod mo siya ngayon tapos bukas hindi mo na siya susundin. So, the Constitution serves as a supreme or fundamental law and establishes basic framework and underlying principles of government. It speaks for the entire population from whom it derives its claim to obedience. We have a saying or a line which says that no one is above the law, meaning kahit presidente ka, hindi ka ligtas sa batas. Kapag ka may nilalabag ka rito, kailangan mong harapin ang karampatang parusa. Although we have to be very realistic and we have to have our eyes opened na in our society, there is a great injustice na kung saan ang mga nasa itaas ng tatsulok ay nakakaiwas sa batas, nakakagawa pa rin sila ng mga paglabag, pero hindi sila napaparusahan. Nakakaiwas sila sa parusa dahil sa kanilang kapangyarihan. They have resources, they have money, they have connections, they have the power. At ang dumaranas lang ng kaparusahan ay yung mga mahihirap. Of course, kung mahirap ka at ginawa mo yung kasalanan, marapat lang naman na maparusahan ka. Pero there are cases, you have to be aware of this, na kahit hindi naman niya kasalanan or wala naman siyang sala, dahil makapangyarihan yung nakabangga niya, matatalo siya at siya yung magdudusa o magbabayad ng damages. At kaya naman napaka evident ng injustice, lalong-lalo na dito sa ating bansa. But we don't have a choice. This is our only land here in the Philippines. We should love it, we should defend it, and we strive hard to change the society, hopefully. Okay, next. Understanding the nature and purpose or function of the Constitution. For us to better understand it, here are its purposes, pero we discuss muna its nature. Ano ba yung pinaka-characteristic ng isang constitution? So it refers to that body of rules, once again, and principles in accordance with which the powers of sovereignty are regularly exercised. Referring particularly to Philippine Constitution, is defined as a written instrument by which the fundamental powers of the government are established, limited and defined, by which these powers are distributed among the several departments or branches for their safe and useful exercise for the benefit of the people. Okay, the very purpose of the Constitution is to benefit the people. If we are talking only about the Philippine Constitution, ito yung matatawag natin na written instrument. So, hindi lang ito word of the mouth or orally transmitted, pero we have it documented para mas maging malakas siya na sandata. Kasi kapag hindi mo siya do-document, pwedeng magkaroon ng iba't ibang interpretations kapag ka word of mouth lang. So, dapat malinaw na ili-lay out sa isang written document. Okay, so here are the following are the nature of the Constitution. Number 1, it serves as the supreme or fundamental law and establishes basic framework underlying principles of government. When we say framework, it has chapters, it has sections, it has articles. Kaya nga kapag ka nagbabasa tayo ng Constitution, naririnig nyo yung Article 4, ganyan, Chapter 2, Section 3B, Section 8, etc. So, it's a framework, andoon naka-layout, naka-outline, at divided into categories or groups. May subdivisions din. Tapos, syempre, kapag sinabi natin categorical or categorized, ang isang section, for example, ang isang chapter ay patungkol lang sa isang sangay, or the most common chapter ay yung tinatawag natin na human rights. Yan, I think, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember it well, kasi memorize namin yun. Chapter 3 yun, I believe. I hope I'm not mistaken. So, we will go back to that at explain natin yung bawat chapters na bumubuo ng isang constitution sa ating synchronous class. Okay, so it serves as framework of the social, economic, and political life of the nation. So as I've said, it has categories, it has divisions and subdivisions. At ito yung mga yun, social, economic, and political. Okay, and number 3, it governs all areas of human endeavor. Ito yung pinaka-nagustuhan ko actually na characteristic o nature ng Constitution na sinabi dito. It governs all areas of human endeavor. Ibig sabihin, ano ba yung mga human activities natin? For example, you are in your workplace. So, may mga administrative cases tayo na kapag, for example, ikaw sinabotage mo yung katrabaho mo dahil may galit ka sa kanya, tapos na find out at may strong evidence, pwede kang kasuhan. O kapag estudyante ka, nag-copy-paste ka, yung pinag-copy-pastean mo na find out yun, at may ebidensya siya, pwede ka rin kasuhan. So, sa tingin nyo lang na ang plagiarism mo, ang copy-pasting ay isang norm sa mga estudyante, pero hindi nyo alam na mabigat na bagay yan, na kaso yan, na pwede nyo kaharapin kung makatagpo lang kayo ng isang source o seryosong tao na makapag-monitor na nagka-copy-paste kayo sa kanyang source o sa kanyang material. Pag na-monitor niya at na-track niya kayo, pwede niya kayong balikan. Kaya ano pa? All areas of human endeavor sa mga businessmen. O, diba? Ano ba ang human activities na iba pa sa mga may negosyo? May mga batas din tayo patungkol dyan. Pagbabayad ng tax. Unang-una, ano ba yung negosyo mo? Dapat it should be legal. O, pwede ka bang magbenta ng shabu? Syempre hindi, diba? So, aalamin kung anong klaseng business ka, kung ilang percent yung dapat mong ibalik sa gobyerno, yung sa pamamagitan ng iyong buwis. Okay, what else? So, in the field of business, in your profession, or being a student, sa lahat ng human activities, sakop ng Constitution. Kasi sa lahat ng galaw natin, dapat ayon sa pagsunod ng Constitution. Yung simpleng pangnalait mo, although ang laging sinasabi dito ay you have the freedom of speech, pero hindi nila alam na may limitations tayo doon sa freedom of speech natin. So, kapag kanilait mo ang isang tao at nakapag-harm sa kanya yun, pwede kanyang kasuhan. Unjust vexation, ang tawag natin doon. I think it's the simplest form of a case that you can file against a person na nangungut siya sa'yo, minura ka, or binuli ka. Okay. So, ano pa? In our daily walks, sa ating buhay, governed tayo ng Constitution. Kasi yung simpleng pagsapak mo sa nakaaway mo sa kalsada, tapos legal age kayong dalawa, pwede kanyang kasuhan, diba? Kasi physical mo siya. Okay, so that is the point na it covers all human endeavor. Sa lahat ng ginagalawan natin or ginagawa natin, dapat na ayon pa rin sa batas o sa Constitution. Bilang ikaw ay isang guro, isang estudyante, isang businessman, o bilang isang tao, bilang isang citizen ng Republika ng Pilipinas, dapat na ayon ang iyong galaw sa Constitution. Dahil kung hindi, may makatagpo ka na magkakaso sa'yo ay may kakarapin kang karampatang parusa kapag napatunayan na ikaw ay lumabag sa batas. Okay, here are the purposes naman: to prescribe the permanent framework or the system of the government. Okay. Ano ba yung mga sistema natin sa gobyerno, yung mga divisions natin? Okay, areas. Okay. Number 2, to assign the different department, ito na yung sinasabi ko, or branches, their respective powers and duties. Constitution ang nagli-layout actually ng duties, responsibilities, at limitations ng bawat branch ng gobyerno natin. Totoo na ang highest natin yung executive, pero totoo rin na may checks and balances tayo na tinatawag na kung saan kapag ka sumobra yung executive, pwede naman siyang i-impeach ng ibang branch ng government natin. So, yun yung checks and balances na tinatawag natin. Kaya nga, no one is above the law. Meron pa ring mechanism para ma-check ang kilos ng ating executive. So, we have 3 branches. I'm sure na aware kayo sa tatlong ito. I can just hope. Pero, tingin ko naman oo. So, executive, legislative, and judiciary. Okay, number 3, to establish certain basic principles on which the government is founded. Of course, before the people of the land will follow the Constitution, dapat yung gobyerno muna ang manguna na sumunod dito para maging isang ehemplo sa kanyang mga tao. Okay, 4th, to preserve and protect the rights of individuals against the arbitrarily actions of those in authority, and its function is not to legislate in detail but to set the limit on the unlimited power of the legislature. So, ito yung pinaka-purpose ng Constitution, to protect the rights of all individuals. May karapatan tayo, pero sabi nga nila, your right stops when the right of others begins. So, lahat tayo may karapatan. Dapat lang na maging responsable tayo sa pag-exercise ng mga karapatang ito. For example, yung right of suffrage natin. Dati hindi yan karapatan. Ang mga may karapatang bumoto lang dati, mga lalaki. Tapos yung mga babae ay walang karapatang makilahok sa election, walang karapatang bumoto, na nanatili lang sa bahay hanggang sa naipaglaban na sila ay membro rin ng society at dapat magkaroon ng boses. Kaya, nandito na tayo sa era or generation na kung saan ay lahat involved sa election at sa pagboto. So, we have right of suffrage. Ang dami nating karapatan. Kung isa-isahin natin yan, kailangan natin pag-aralan yung chapter na yun patungkol solely sa human rights o karapatang pantao. Okay, so i-discuss na natin yung 4 na types of constitution. Unahin na natin yung the Malolos Constitution. Okay, background of its framing. Paano ba ito nabuo? Returning to the Philippines on May 19, 1898, after leaving the country on voluntary exile to Hong Kong as part of the agreement under the Pact of Biak na Bato, Emilio Aguinaldo established the dictatorial government on May 24, 1898, which he said would only be a temporary government and to last only until the establishment of a republic. Yan, si Aguinaldo ang nagtatag ng constitution na ito or dictatorial government na sabi niya ay temporary lamang, mawawala din kapag ka na itayo na yung republika. Okay. Sana tatandaan niyo yung pangyayari sa Biak na Bato. Ito yung kasunduan niya with the Spanish people, Spaniards. Ayan. Okay, on June 12, 1898, Aguinaldo proclaimed the Philippine independence in Kawit, Cavite, where the Philippine flag was unfurled and the Philippine national anthem was played. Okay, we already set ourselves free from the hands of the Spaniards, pero the question here is, were we really freed? Nakalaya nga ba tayo? Pagkatapos tayong sakupin ng mga Espanyol, sumunod ang mga Amerikano. So, were we really freed? Did we really attain the essence and the very purpose of freedom? if we were subjected to yet another colonization. Okay, 11 days after the proclamation of the Philippine independence, upon the advice of Apolinario Mabini, who had become his advisor, si Apolinario Mabini, utak talaga niya yung ginagamit niya class at yung naging instrumental noong unang panahon, kasi si Apolinario Mabini yung isa sa mga pinakamatalino na nabuhay noong unang panahon. Okay, he issued a decree changing the dictatorial government to revolutionary government. So, tumupad si Aguinaldo na temporary lang yung dictatorial government at itinatag niya yung revolutionary government. So, the dictatorial government existed only for 30 days. Yan, 30 days lang naging dictatorial government. Tapos, nung itinatag na itong revolutionary, nawala na itong dictatorial. A revolutionary government again, kasi we took our government back from the Spaniards. So, sila yung nag-colonize sa atin, napalayas natin sila through the help of the Americans. At nagkaroon tayo ng isang revolutionary government after we attained our freedom from the Spaniards. Okay, on the basis of the decree issued by Aguinaldo, the title of the chief of state was changed from dictator to president. And the revolutionary government, as decreed by Aguinaldo, had a strong executive branch with 4 department heads aiding the president, namely Foreign Affairs, Navy and Commerce, War and Public Works, Police and Internal Order, Justice, Education and Hygiene, Finance, Agriculture, and Manufacturing Industry. So, dito pala nagsimula class lahat ng agencies, department, sectors na meron tayo ngayon dito sa ating bansa. So, ngayon na-classify na yan. Dami na, Department of Finance, Department of Agriculture, Philippine Statistics Authority, Department of Education, Department of Public Works and Highways, Department of Science and Technology. All of these department, sectors, agencies, government agencies actually originated from only 4 departments noong panahon ni Aguinaldo. Okay, so yan, ngayon alam nyo na yan lang ang meron tayo noon na katuwang ng executive o katuwang ng presidente sa pamamahala ng gobyerno. And then later on, habang nagkakaroon ng revisions dito sa ating constitution, ay na i-specify na yung mga dapat na pangalan o mga under ng bawat department. Okay, so the Pact of Biak na Bato was an agreement signed on December 14, 1897 between the Spaniards and Aguinaldo to end the Philippine Revolution. President Aguinaldo and his fellow revolutionists were given amnesty, monetary, and indemnity by the Spanish government in return for voluntary exile. Okay, ito yung provisions ng Pact ng Biak na Bato. Ito yung content niya na sinabihan or agreement between Spaniards at Aguinaldo na tapusin na yung Philippine Revolution. Ayan. At binigyan pa sila ng amnesty, monetary, and indemnity ng Spanish government. Okay. The Malolos Congress was inaugurated at the Barasuain Church on September 15, 1898. The creation of Congress was a significant feature of the decree. The delegates to Congress were to be elected, and in case of provinces that had not been pacified or liberated from the Spaniards, delegates would be appointed. The powers of Congress were clearly defined. IDFs to watch over the general interests of the Philippine people and the carrying out of the revolutionary laws, to discuss and vote upon said laws, to discuss and approve prior to their ratification, treaties and loans, to examine and approve the accounts presented annually by the Secretary of Finance, as well as extraordinary and other taxes may hereafter be imposed. Okay, so nililay-out na nila yung bawat duties and responsibilities ng every department. Okay, this starts the selection of the representative from each provinces of the country, though at this time not all place is the Philippines liberated from Spain. So kahit na naideklara na ang ating kalayaan, na-unfurl na yung Philippine flag, na iwagayway na, at na-declare na yung kalayaan natin mula sa mga Espanyol, hindi lahat ng probinsya ay actually nakalaya na sa Spanish government. Meaning, may mga probinsya pa rin dito sa Pilipinas noong unang panahon na ang namamahala ay isa pa ring Espanyol. So, hindi agad-agad na palayas lahat ng mga Espanyol at hindi agad-agad na ang namuno ay mga Pilipino pagkatapos nating makamit yung ating kalayaan. But perhaps majority of the places or the provinces here in the Philippines were already taken back from the Filipino taken back by the Filipino leaders, Filipino people. Okay. So, paano nabuo ang Malolos Constitution? Nothing about the framing of a constitution was implied for in the June 18, 1898 decree issued by Aguinaldo. The framing, however, was an action taken from the former's address to Malolos Congress during its opening. Joaquin Gonzalez and Felipe Calderon drafted the rules of the drafting of the Constitution. So, yung pag-create or pagsulat ng Constitution, pag-draft ng Constitution ay may rules actually. So, ginawan din ng mga dapat sundin o panuntunan bago ka magsulat ng Constitution. Here are the things that you have to consider, you have to follow, diba? Okay, they adapted the rules of the Spanish Cortes, doing a little variation. So, meron na tayong existing mga pamantayan mula sa Spanish Cortes. Ito yung government noong unang panahon nung ang mga namumuno pa sa atin ay mga Espanyol. Inadapt lang nila yun, tapos binago lang nila ng koonti. So, comprising the committee to draft the Malolos Constitution were, please take note of the following people, they are very significant. Sila yung mga kauna-unahang Pilipino na nagsulat ng mga batas o nag-draft ng ating Constitution. So, sina Pedro Paterno, Felipe Buen Camino, and Felipe Calderon. Apolinario Mabini also submitted his draft of the Constitution called the Constitutional Program of the Philippine Republic, and so did Paterno. So, sino yung dalawa na nakapag-submit o nakapag-sumite ng kanilang draft ng or proposal ng nilalaman ng Constitution? We have Paterno and Apolinario Mabini. Sabi ko nga, si Apolinario Mabini ay tinatawag na utak noong unang panahon. Siya nga yung tinatawag natin na utak ng Katipunan, diba? Dahil sa kanyang angking talino. Okay, voting on the articles. Sana tayo? Balikan ko lang. Voting on the articles of the draft of the Constitution started on October 28. Okay, the provision making Catholicism the state religion divided the Congress. After further debates on the adoption of a state religion, the delegates on a vote of 26 against 25 approved the following as Article 5 of the draft Constitution. The state recognizes the freedom and equality of all religious worships as well as the separation of the church and state. Okay, so dito nagsimula yung tinatawag natin na separation of church and state class. Sa unang-unang type of constitution natin ay mayroon ng ganitong provision. Ibig sabihin, nakita na nila yung importansya ng separation of church and state. Dapat hindi nagme-meddle in ang bawat isa sa activities or separate activities ng bawat isa, so long as pareho pa rin ay sumusunod sa batas. So, again, no one is above the law. Kahit na may separation, dapat within the provisions of the law pa rin yung kanilang pagkilos. Anchored pa rin sa batas, pagsunod sa batas, yung mga aktibidades ng dalawang grupo na ito. Okay, so 26/25 yung bumoto na dapat magkaroon ng kalayaan ang sino man na pumili ng kanyang relihiyon or paniniwala. Kaya, mayroon tayong iba't ibang religion ngayon, although, nasabi ko na sa inyo ito na majority, obviously, ay mga Catholics. And Catholicism or Christianity is the greatest influence of our colonizer na mga Espanyol or Spanish government. Sila ang nagdala ng Christianity dito sa Pilipinas, at hanggang ngayon, evident pa rin itong influence na ito kasi sa population natin, pinakamarami ang mga Katoliko. Okay, other religions here in the Philippines, we have born again Christian, Iglesia ni Cristo, Seventh-day Adventist, mga Baptist natin, yung mga yan. Okay, the Malolos Constitution was submitted by Pedro A. Paterno with Pablo Texon and Pablo Ocampo, Secretaries of the Congress. It has a preamble, 101 articles, and an additional article. Itong preamble, we memorized this before, but I already forgot it. Pero may debates regarding this, or yung punto na sinasabi nila na yung preamble daw ang pinakasama rin na ng buong constitution. So maybe they have arrived at such a point or a statement because yung sinasabi sa preamble ay yung pagsunod mo sa Panginoon, pagsunod sa batas, ayan, yung hindi mo pag-api sa iyong kapwa. So yun naman, doon naman founded yung lahat ng batas, yung wala kang inaapakang tao, hindi ka nakakalamang. So kaya siguro nila nasabi na summary na siya ng buong constitution. Pero in a sense, or in a wider sense, in a deeper sense, ay hindi. Syempre dahil napakalawak ng constitution, napakadetalyado, at kailangan natin yun kasi kung sa tingin mo o kung sa alam mo ay hindi ka nakakapak ng tao or hindi ka nakakagawa ng masama, pero mali ka, hindi mo lang alam na may ganoong batas, hindi ka lang aware. Pero sabi nga nila, no one, or the law excuses, ignorance of the law excuses no one. Ibig sabihin, it is your duty, it is our duty to study to study our obligations as citizens of the Philippines. So, kapag nirason mo na, hindi ko kasi alam na mali pala yun or masama pala yun, ay hindi yun tatanggapin sa korte. So, kapag inamin mo yun, ibig sabihin, ginawa mo yung kasalanan, hindi ka lang aware, pero hindi yun makakapagligtas sa'yo dahil ignorance of the law excuses no one nga. Hindi dahilan na hindi mo alam kung bakit mo na-commit ang isang crime na yon, for example. So, mapapatawan ka ng karampatang parusa sa ginawa mo na hindi mo na alam na mali, pero nagawa mo pa rin siya. Okay, so yung pinakauna, 101 articles lang, yung na-craft nila or naipasa nila. Kaya nagkaroon ng revisions kasi syempre, dapat pinalawak pa nila, in-specify pa nila, at mas lalong nakatugon sa lahat ng tao na specify mismo yung mga artikulo or mga kabilang provisions ng batas. So, noong una, 101 lang. So, the Malolos Constitution, referred to as the political constitution of the state by its framers, composed of 88 delegates to the National Assembly, which is composed of 14 titles, a transitionary provision, 101 articles, and an additional article referring to all land, buildings, and other properties belonging to the religious corporations being restored to the Filipino states as provided for by the dictatorial government of Cavite on May 24, 1898. Ayan, kung mapapansin niyo dito, sa wakas, nung nagkaroon na nga ng konstitusyon ng bansa sa ilalim ni Aguinaldo, nagkaroon ng batas patungkol sa pagbabalik ng mga corporations na ito sa mga Pilipino na or sa Philippine government na. Kasi diba na pag-aralan natin na yung mga friars noong unang panahon, they owned haciendas, they ran schools, they ran the government. Ayan, marami silang ari-arianong pagmamayari na sa wakas, itong religious corporations na ito ay na-restore na to the Filipino people, to the Filipino state. Okay, Felipe Calderon headed the committee in the creation of the Constitution with the help of Cayetano Arellano, though it was schemed by some personal intentions and biases. The first significant act of the Malolos Congress was the ratification of the Declaration of Independence on June 12, 1898 at Kawit, Cavite, and some other laws that was passed are the borrowing of 20 million pesos from different banks to be used for the government's expenses, construction of universities, creation of the Philippine Constitution, and declaration of war against the Americans. Ayan. Kasi nga, after nating nakamit yung kalayaan natin mula sa mga Espanyol, ang sumunod naman na nakop sa atin ay mga Amerikano. At through the political caricature na na-discuss ko sa inyo, wherein the Filipino people already expressed their dismay over the American government. Ayan. Unti-unti na silang namumulat na pareho lang ito nung unang nanakop sa atin. Kailangan nilang lumayas dito sa lupain natin. Because this is our land, this is the Philippines. We should be living independently of any foreign leader or foreign government, okay, foreign colonizer. So, noon pa lang, binavalue na natin yung relationship natin with other countries at patunay dito yung pangungutang natin sa iba't ibang bangko para lang ma-suffice yung pangangailangan ng ating bansa. Saan ginamit itong 20 million pesos na ito? Construction of universities, pagpapatayo ng mga universidad na magkikater sa Filipino students. Okay. Tapos yung pag-create ng constitution at pagdeklara natin ng war against the Americans. So, on January 21, 1899, after many revision, President Emilio Aguinaldo presented the Malolos Constitution. This also starts the separation of church and state. Okay, so yun yung Malolos Constitution natin, class. I hope that is clear. How many articles? Once again, 101. Tapos dito na nagawa ito para mag-declare tayo ng war against the Americans. At dito rin tayo nakapagpatayo ng universities, ayan, na tutugon sa pangangailangang edukasyon ng mga estudyante natin, mga Pilipinong estudyante. Okay, pangalawang constitution, yung 1935. Considered as one of the noblest documents written by Filipinos, the drafting, approval, and promulgation of the 1935 Constitution was not without pain on the part of the noblemen who never tired aspiring and working for an independent Philippines. Yan, noblest document daw itong 1935 Constitution dahil hindi napagod ang mga nag-craft nito, mga Pilipino, para lang makamit ng Pilipinas yung kanyang inaasam na kalayaan. So, 2 commissions were sent to the Philippines during the American military regime to check on the conditions obtaining the archipelago. The first Philippine Commission, otherwise known as the Skurman Commission, arrived in the country on March 4, 1899, headed by Dr. Jacob Sherman. Okay, the Sherman Commission was given the mission of surveying the Philippine conditions and to achieve the peaceful extension of American sovereignty over the archipelago. However, due to the raging war between Filipinos and the Americans, the commission failed to accomplish its mission. Kasi ayaw na nga ng mga Pilipino na ma-extend pa yung governance ng mga Amerikano dito sa Pilipinas. Gusto na nilang pamunuan yung kanilang sariling bansa na dapat lumayas na ang mga Amerikano. Kami ng mga Pilipino ang bahala sa aming bansa, bahala sa aming country, kami na mismo ang mamumuno. Kaya hindi sila pumayag doon sa extension na purpose ng mission ng Skurman Commission. Okay, the second commission was headed by Judge William H. Taft, known as the Taft Commission. Ito na pag-aralan natin. Ito during high school. I hope na you still recall, you still remember. This commission was guided by the McKinley's instructions, which became the Magna Carta of the Philippines. More successful than the Skurman Commission. So, kung hindi nagtagumpay yung Skurman, itong Taft Commission naman stayed in the Philippines from September 1900 to August 1902, which exercised legislative functions and enacted 499 laws. It continued as the legislative body even when civil government was already established in the country. So kahit meron na tayong civil government, nag-interfere pa rin itong mga Amerikano at nagtagumpay itong pangalawang ipinadala nila na Taft Commission. Kasi na, in fact, nakapag pasa pa ng batas 499. So, napakarami yan. Of course, itong mga batas na ito maybe for the purpose of extending or lengthening the years of the American rule or governance here in the Philippines. So, despite this, however, the Filipinos' strong desire to be free was not extinguished. So, kahit na nagtagumpay yung pangalawang misyon na ipinadala ng mga Amerikano, hindi pa rin nawawala sa puso't isipan ng mga Pilipino yung kagustuhan nilang makalaya. So, they used the press and the stage to express their ardent desire for freedom. Thus, the American authorities tightened the censorship for the press and stage. Ayaw tayong pakawalan ng mga Amerikano. Bakit kaya? Anong meron sa Pilipinas na gusto nila tayong sakupin? Is it because of our rich natural resources? Masyado ba nilang pinapakinabangan yun? Or they just want to extend their sovereignty? Hindi sila kontento sa napakalaking area nila sa kanilang bansa. Kaya gusto nilang sakupin ang ibang bansa katulad ng Pilipinas. So kahit na nag-i-stage ng protest ang mga Pilipino, ginagamit na nila yung press, ang response ng mga Amerikano ay i-tighten yung censorship ng press. Ibig sabihin, hindi nila ipinapalabas yung mga ini-stage ng mga Pilipino or sa mga publications, hindi nila inilalabas yung mga isinusulat ng mga Filipino writers natin patungkol sa kanilang kagustuhan na makalaya na sa American government. So, 2 suppressive laws were passed. The Sedition Law declaring that during the duration of the war, it was treasonable for any Filipino to advocate independence, and the flag law banning the public display of the Filipino flag. O grabe nandito tayo sa Pilipinas pero hindi natin maibandera yung watawat natin, yung Filipino flag yung flag natin, the Filipino flag. Dahil kapag binabandera mo yun, simbolo yun ng pagmamahal mo sa bayan at yung kagustuhan mo na mapalayas yung mga nananako. So, during the war, ipinagbawal ng mga Amerikano na mag-express ang mga Pilipino ng kanilang sentiments o ng kanilang pagsalungat sa American government. Treasonable ito, considered treasonable at ibig sabihin, pagtataksil sa bayan or pagtataksil sa present government. Yun ang treason na tinatawag natin at pinakamataas or pinakamalala na crime na pwedeng i-commit ng any citizen or any Filipino. At ang karampatang parusa dito ay syempre yung pinakamalala rin. So, on October 6, 1907, the Philippine Assembly was inaugurated at the Manila Grand Opera House. Sergio Osmeña was chosen speaker and Manuel L. Quezon was the majority floor leader. Take note of the name. Siguro naman familiar na kayo kina Sergio Osmeña, Manuel L. Quezon. In 1912, Francis Burton Harrison became the new Governor General of the Philippines. He was liberal-minded, and the aspiration of the Filipinos for independence became not a distant possibility. So, etong sumunod na Governor General, si Francis Burton Harrison, siya ay liberal-minded. Ibig sabihin ng liberal, yung liberation natin, yung freedom, yung pagiging knowledgeable na ng mga tao, yun din ang ipino-forward or ipino-push forth ni Harrison. Kaya naman, yung possibility na makalaya ang mga Pilipino ay tumataas na yung tsansa under Harrison's government. So, in 1916, the Jones Law was passed. The light for independence was shining brighter for the Filipinos. Ito. So, unti-unti na nilang nakakamit ang kanilang kagustuhan na makalaya mula sa mga Amerikano. Ano ba itong Jones Law na ito? It states in its preamble that independence would be granted to the Filipinos as soon as a stable government could be established in the Philippines. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, class, na pinangako ng mga Amerikano na kapag may kakayahan na ang mga Pilipino na pamunuan ang kanilang sariling bayan at ang kanilang sariling mga tao, ay lalayas na ang mga Amerikano. So, the Jones Law had a Bill of Rights safeguarding the rights and liberties of the people. Again, this is under Francis Burton Harrison, described here as someone who is liberal-minded. Yung kanyang pag-iisip o kanyang disposition sa buhay ay patungkol sa freedom, sa gaining of knowledge. Ayan. So, as years went by, the relations between the camp of Quezon and Osmeña turned sour. Quezon charmed the U.S. Congress and won it to his side, and a new law, the Tidings-McDuffie Law, sponsored by Senator Millard E. Tidings and Representative John McDuffie, was passed and signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Ito yung nakakalungkot sa mga Pilipino, class, na instead na magkaisa tayo towards one goal, and obviously, during this time, ang goal nila ay makalaya mula sa mga Amerikano, and nagkakaroon pa ng divisions because of personal interests or dreams, aspirations sa buhay. Gusto mong makaangat or meron kang ambisyon sa buhay, tapos nawawala na yung ultimate goal dahil sa ambisyon na ito. So, we find out what happens here. So, nagkalabuan si Osmeña at Quezon. Tapos, itong si Quezon, naakit niya daw ang Amerikano, ang US Congress. Tapos, kumampi sa kanya. The US took his side. And because of that, isang batas ay naipasa at ito yung Tidings-McDuffie Law. So, ang nagsulat nito ay si Senator Millard E. Tidings. Akalain niyo yung mga namumuno sa atin, mga senators, mga governor, mga Amerikano. Okay, and Representative John McDuffie. At ang pumirma ay yung kasalukuyang presidente noon na si Franklin D. Roosevelt. Okay, so ano tong McDuffie? The Tidings-McDuffie Act is the Philippine Independence Act that established the process for the Philippines to become an independent country after a 10-year transition period. It also established limitation on Filipino immigration to the United States. Ayan. So, sa Tidings-McDuffie na ito, makakamit na ng Pilipinas ang kalayaan maging isang independent country na ito pagkatapos ng 10 taon na transition period. At sa batas din na ito, sinabi na or nilimitahan ang pag-migrate ng mga Pilipino sa United States. Okay, Constitution Convention na tayo. Con-con. Tinatawag natin ng con-con. If we have charter change or cha-cha, we also have Constitutional Convention or con-con. Ano tong con-con? Under the Tidings-McDuffie Act, a constitutional convention had to be called the Philippine Legislature to draft the Constitution of the Philippines. Thus, it passed an act on May 5, 1934, setting the election of 202 delegates to the convention. As per the rules adopted by the convention, any delegate could submit constitutional proposals which would be studied by the pertinent committee, and the committee would make the report to the sponsorship committee, which duty was to consider the different constitutional proposals submitted by the committees and to prepare a draft of the Constitution. So, babaguhin na nila yung Constitution, Constitutional Convention na tayo, at ang nag-gather para sa activity na ito ay ilan? 202 na delegates. The finished draft of the Constitution was reported by the subcommittee of 7 to the sponsorship committee on October 20, 1934. The glorious day came when the Constitution was approved by the Convention on February 8, 1995 with a vote of 177 to 1. So, ang daming bumoto para sa Constitutional Convention na to, kaya naman, meron na tayong Second Constitution. The birth of the Second Constitution is a much more peaceful battle to gain the Philippine independence. Even there are instant battle between the Philippines and American soldiers, the Americans are more tolerant of the tolerant of the Filipinos who wishes for liberty o kalayaan. Unfortunately, Filipino politicians at this time are starting to quarrel because of the different views pertaining to the independence of the Philippines. A group wanted a full independence, while others favored that there should still be a control from the Americans. But because of Manuel L. Quezon, the American Congress finally passed the Tidings-McDuffie Law, which have an overwhelming approval from the Filipinos. Ayan. The third constitution we have, the 1973 Philippine Constitution. Pangatlo na to, class. The 1935 Constitution was the constitution drafted when the Philippines was a colony of the United States of America. Ito yung kakatapos lang na i-discuss natin. Okay, its drafting was done after the U.S. Congress gave its approval for its drafting. It was then submitted to the President of the United States for his approval, which he did. Considering the background by which it was drafted and approved, there was no doubt that it had provisions that did not reflect the ideals and aspirations of the Filipino people. Of course, kasi may agenda naman talaga itong constitution na ito kasi gustong i-lengthen o pahabain ng mga Amerikano yung kanilang rule dito sa Pilipinas. Likewise, the 1935 Constitution was no longer responsive to the needs of a country which is not a colony of the U.S. anymore. The conditions and problems of the country after 40 years of the 1935 Constitution being effect had changed, and there was a need for new setup and policies. Thus, having this as rationale, Resolution Number 2, Series 1967 was approved by both Houses of Congress in joint session, which provided for the election of delegate to the Constitutional Convention in 1971. Again, nagkonkon ulit tayo para baguhin yung 1935 Constitution. So, the Constitution was interrupted by the proclamation of martial law on September 21, 1972. 11 members of the convention were arrested. It reconvened and finished their work. A plebiscite for its approval by the people was scheduled. However, President Marcos issued Presidential Decree Number 86 canceling the plebiscite and instead instituted barangay citizen assemblies to ratify the new constitution by referendum. The ratification was held from January 10 to 15, 1973. So, itong pangatlong constitution natin, class, ang may associate natin na presidente dito ay si Marcos na, Ferdinand Marcos. Okay, so dun sa pangalawa si Quezon, etong pangatlo si President Marcos na. So of the 22,883,632 registered voters in that year, 90,908,760 cast their votes. 14,976,561 voted in favor of the new constitution and 743,869 voted against. So, mas marami yung panig na magkaroon ng konkon sa panahon ni Marcos. On January 17, 1973, Marcos issued Proclamation Number 1102, certifying and proclaiming that the 1972 Constitution had been ratified by the Filipino people and thereby was in effect. So the change of the Constitution was because the 1935 Constitution was drafted when the Philippines is still the colony of the United States. Thus, it became irrelevant at that time because the Philippines is already an independent country. So, ito yung rason na ginagamit ni Marcos sa pagkandak niya ng konkon dahil daw yung 1935 Constitution ang gumawa nun at ang nagpasa nun ay mga Amerikano at hindi na raw applicable sa panahon niya dahil hindi na raw na tutugunan ng konstitusyon na yon yung pangangailangan ng mga tao sa bansa. So, the legislature has to draft a new constitution that will be applicable on that era. Yung mapapakinabangan na kasi diba ang purpose ng constitution ay para for the benefit of the people. So though some allegations are raised that it was for President Marcos' personal gain so that he can extend to rule over the country, changing from presidential to parliamentary type of government. Ito na yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina, ang ginagawa niyang rason or pang-cover niya sa kanyang true agenda or purpose. Sinabi niya na ang 1935 Constitution ay hindi na tumutugon sa pangangailangan ng mga tao, kaya kailangan na nating baguhin na siyang magiging applicable sa panahon natin ngayon. Pero ang daming nagsabi na ang tanging purpose lang naman ni President Marcos kung bakit niya binago yung Constitution ay para patagalin yung kanyang pananatili sa pwesto. So, from presidential type of government, ginawa niyang parliamentary. Amendments to the 1973 Constitution. The 1976 Amendment contained several other provisions such as President Marcos would also become the Prime Minister. Thus, he would exercise the powers of both the executive and the legislative. He was able to widen the coverage of his power, the scope of his power. Kasi diba kanina na-discuss ko sa inyo na may divisions yun, tatlong yun, tapos may checks and balances sila sa bawat isa. Pero dito sa parliamentary, ang cover ni Marcos ay both executive at legislative. When he deemed it necessary, he was authorized to make laws outside the parliament. This makes him more powerful since he can make law and execute it almost at the same time without the approval of the members of the legislation. Kapag may naisipan siya na papabor sa kanya or personal gain niya, kayang-kaya niyang i-proclaim kahit na wala pang approval from the members of the legislation, kasi nga yung coverage na ng power niya ay hindi lang sa executive branch, pati na rin sa yung kanina legislative. Okay, so the 1980 Amendment was the extension of the retirement age of the members of the judiciary from 65 to 70. The 1981 Amendment naman states that the President as head of state and chief executive may run for as many as 6-year terms as he wished. O syempre, hanggat nabubuhay ka, o di takbo ka lang ng takbo sa pagka-presidente, at kapag lagi kang nananalo, syempre, ikaw yung may hawak ng resources, ikaw yung may makinarya, ikaw yung may malaking chance sa manalo at i-govern ang buong Pilipinas. So, ano ba ang rason ng kahit sino na magagawa ng batas na ganito class na patakbuhin yung kanyang sarili for every 6 years kung kailan man niya gustuhin? Hindi ba kasakiman na yan sa kapangyarihan? Kasi pwede namang ipagpatuloy ng susunod sa iyo yung mga programang nasimulan mo. Staying in the power just re-echoes selfishness at yung kanyang kagustuhan or kasakiman sa kapangyarihan. Aside from that, what other reasons can you think of para sa isang tao, to anyone, not only to Marcos, na pahabain niya yung kanyang stay in the power or termino? Kasi ang presidency ay I consider it as a job for 6 years na kailangan mong gampanan para ayusin ang Pilipinas. So if you would notice, these amendments are to further extend the power of the presidency. Okay, lastly, ito na yung last and latest natin na nanganganib na at babaguhin na rin ito sa tingin ko sa another Marcos na presidente natin. So we have the fourth constitution, the 1987 Philippine Constitution. After the coup d'etat staged by Juan Ponce Enrile and Fidel Ramos, which resulted to the cheat made by then President Ferdinand Marcos during the February 1986 snap election, EDSA People Power toppled down the Marcos government. Then Mrs. Corazon C. Aquino was declared as president. So, yung doon sa election, nilabanan ni Cory Aquino si Marcos. Nanalo si Cory Aquino, pero itong si Marcos, idineklara pa rin niya yung kanyang sarili bilang presidente ng Republika ng Pilipinas. Ikinagalit ito ng mga tao na nagudyok sa kanila na magtipon doon sa EDSA, kaya naman nagkaroon ng EDSA People Power. So, malaking kaguluhan ito. Ang daming namatay. Pero nagtagumpay sila kasi na ipa-excel nila si Marcos, siya ng kanyang buong pamilya ay nag-travel sa Hong Kong, napalaya sila sa Pilipinas, at ang na-declare na presidente ay ito na ngang si Corazon Aquino. So on March 23, 1986, she issued Proclamation Number 3, under which a provisional constitution of the Republic of the Philippines known as the Freedom Constitution was promulgated. A transitional revolutionary government was established. Again, tinawag siyang revolutionary government kasi the government was taken through force or through a revolution. On October 12, 1986, the draft of the proposed constitution was voted upon. The constitution was signed by the members of the CONCON on October 15, 1986 and was presented to President Aquino on the same date. Thereafter, it was submitted for ratification of the Filipino people in a plebiscite on February 2, 1987. The people ratified it by a vote of 16,622,11, may kulang na digit dyan, or equivalent to 76.30% against 4,153,375 or 22.74%. So President Aquino issued Proclamation Number 58 proclaiming the Constitution on February 11, 1987. So ano ba tong 1987 Constitution? Ito ay isang constitution na we still use up to this date. Di pa ito napapalitan. Ito yung latest natin na constitution na sinusunod natin. Yung mga batas dito, yung sinusunod natin sa pang-araw-araw na tayo ay nabubuhay. Though there is a call from the present government to change again the constitution to further address the problems of the country from unitary to a federal type of government, which will require to change also the constitution. Pero kung ikaw ay vinavalue mo yung history natin o yung mga nangyari in the past, uulitin po ba itong pagkakamali na ito, yung pag-transform ng ating government from yung democratic government natin into federal, na kung saan malilengthen yung taon na pamamahal ng isang presidente, no, hindi na magkakaroon ng chance yung iba na ilatag yung kanilang plataforma para baguhin at paasensohin ang Pilipinas. So, nasa isang tao lamang ang kapangyarihan, na isang tao at nasa isang pamilya lamang ang kapangyarihan. So, would we repeat our history kahit na alam na natin kung ano ang mga mangyayari? Okay. So, yun yung latest na constitution natin. Again, class, itong 1987 constitution, majority ang bumoto dito kumpara sa bumoto against. So, masasabi natin na panalo talaga si Corazon Aquino, pumanig sa kanya ang taong bayan, ang Filipino people, kasi nagsawa sila at masyado na silang naapi ng isang oppressive government gaya ng dictatorial government ni Ferdinand Marcos. So again, ito yung 4 na constitution natin. I hope you've learned a thing or two. The task that I will be assigning you is that are you in favor of a possible constitutional convention? So, pabor ba kayo na baguhin yung present na constitution na meron tayo ngayon? Yung 1987 constitution, babaguhin into 2022 constitution? If yes, so provide your answers, and if no, provide your explanations din. Okay. Syempre, layout facts. Kailangan ko ng facts at hindi lang opinion. Kung bakit pabor kayo o hindi sa pagbabago ng constitution natin. Okay, that is it for this lesson.